You're gonna do what I say. No, I'm not. What did you say to me? I said, no, I'm not. And there's nothing you can do about it. Struggling to get your point across as a leader? On today's video, I'm going to be talking about 10 key things that you need to be thinking about when it comes to being an effective and impactful leader. If you don't know who I am already, my name is Michael Tabaradi, high performance coach and mentor, and I help self-starters and ambitious professional millennials increase their productivity, enhance their performance, realize their priorities, and live their life on purpose. Now, if this is the first time you come to my YouTube channel, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, all the links are in the description below. Now let's get to the video. Now, as I've progressed through this corporate jungle, I've been able to identify different leadership skills that I think do really well in helping realize a vision. But in addition to that, I've also coached high performing individuals. Now, there are many different definitions for a leader, but for me, it is someone who can authentically and acutely coach, mentor, inspire, sponsor, and influence an organized group of people and help them through a transformation in order to realize a specific vision. Seems very long-winded, but to me, I mentioned those specific qualities and words because those are different roles that I think a leader has. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about different skills and qualities that I think will enable you to become a better leader. The first thing to do is to lead by example. You can't be an individual that says X person needs to do something when you don't do it yourself. And so monkey see, monkey do. You need to make sure that your word is your bond, and that requires a certain level of honesty and discipline that is uncommon. It's important to make sure that you're integral to the individuals that you're serving as a leader. In addition to that, usually those leaders who have values that are similar to the organization's values are really effective in terms of their leadership. So it's very important to make sure that you're clear of your own values and to see whether they align to the organization values as well. Now, in my coach training, we learned something known as leading through ambiguity and complexity. And so in order for you to do this, you need to refer back to your values because that's what allows you to be resilient. And your team members who look to you will see how you respond in these different situations, which will give them inspiration and hope that they can respond accordingly as well. The pandemic is a perfect example. And so as an individual, if you're clear to what is important to you and the team and the vision, then my friends, you will be an effective leader because you are leading by example. So make sure you're able to lead through complexity and ambiguity by knowing your values and sticking to them. The second thing is to lead a team effectively. Now, what does this mean? Now, some of you may be familiar with the Tuckman model. So we have forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. So forming is where a team first forms. Storming is where sometimes there are challenges that may come about within the team. Norming is where you get to a certain point where things have become the status quo. Performing is where you exceed expectations, and adjourning is where, well, my friends, with everything there is an end. And so let's say, for example, with forming, what may happen is that there may be uncertainty and people may not know what to do. And so they'll look to you as a leader in order to have a certain level of certainty and assurance to help them guide them through. With storming as an example, there are many challenges and conflicts that may happen. And so with that in mind, you need to be grounded as a leader, but it's also your responsibility also to raise and empower and enable other individuals to lead as well. And so these are some examples in terms of things you need to think about when it comes to leading a team. The next thing is leading with the right level of governance and accountability. Now, again, in my corporate jungle experience, I've been in situations where, due to poor leadership and poor governance, there's been a breakdown in terms of implementation of a program, but also leaving individuals anxious, depressed, not worthy enough, and confused in terms of what they need to be doing. And so if you're following a governance structure or methodology, then you're in a position of power because that enables individuals to feel confident and understand how to escalate and communicate things effectively in the right way. This may be down to reporting. This may be down to presenting. This may be down to how you communicate a specific message. And so it's your responsibility as a leader to embed and ensure that the right governance is in play. If you're familiar with something known as MSP, managing successful programs, or change management, you'll understand there is a certain structure. So for example, you may have the executive board, you may have sponsor, and then with that, underneath that sponsorship, you'll have the program manager and a business change manager, and they have their own teams. And supporting all this stuff is the PMO, so the program management office, which usually helps to embed this level of governance. Now, sometimes what happens is that programs or projects are done too quickly without the right level of planning, strategy, budget, and capacity to embed some of this stuff. And so there's a breakdown in terms of your delivery and implementation. So as a leader, you need to recognize this stuff, but also have the right level of bravery to call it out when it's not around as well. So your responsibility is to ensure that the right accountability is at play. The next thing to say is to lead like a coach. Now, I say this because if you look at leadership material, it's very similar to coaching material. So you have to have the ability to have deep and active listening. You have to have the ability to ask effective and powerful questions. You need to be able to have the right level of emotional intelligence. If you haven't checked out my video already on emotional intelligence, then make sure to check it out. Breaking it down very briefly, it's having the right level of self-awareness and knowing how to manage and monitor yourself. It's also being in a position where you're able to have the right social awareness and also manage relationships well. And so how you build upon that is having 360s, or doing surveys, or doing the Johari window, or talking to different people and understanding a bit more about how you respond in different situations. In addition to that, it's also about making sure that you build the right relationships. And I've said this many times before, if you're able to build small talk or rapport or relationships with people, you're building their trust and they can be vulnerable with you. And so it puts you in a position where you understand where they're at and you know how to lead effectively to empower them to help this transformation and align towards this vision as well. So make sure you lead like a coach. In addition to that, it's also being able to deal with conflict management pretty well. And so what this means is, if people are fighting, how do you deal with this situation? You may need to sit them down, get them to speak it out, hear both sides of the story, making sure that there is a level of contracting that happens at the beginning. So for example, they all agree that they don't shout or respond unless that person is finished. And then you progressively move down to a point where you're coming to solutions, thinking about how can we overcome this? Once they have agreed this, then you get to a point and state of saying, how can we prevent this from happening again? So knowing how to manage conflict is also a very skillful thing for a leader to do as well. Another thing to think about is to make sure that you lead with a great vision in mind, but it can't stay in your mind. You have to be able to communicate this. So to add to this, a leader must be a great communicator. When talking about your vision, you need to bear this in mind when it comes to visions. It can't be too long. It needs to be easy to understand. It needs to be something that can be verified or measured against. And it needs to empower and inspire individuals to do more and be more. And so how you communicate this is really, really important. So the way you communicate comes down to your presentation, comes down to how you say things, comes down to maybe even visually in terms of how you present yourself. Again, if you want to learn more about communication, you can check out this video also. So communication and vision combined makes you an effective and powerful leader. Comment below and let me know what you think it takes in order to become an effective and powerful leader. Let's get back to the video. The next thing I'd like to talk about is leading with honesty. There is no way that you can be an effective leader if you don't lead with honesty. Now, at times, there are crucial things that happen where a leader is challenged to either present the information to their team or to delay that information and say it until it's too late. But it's very clear, and this leads to the last point, that transparency is really important when it comes to effective leadership, because team members want to feel involved whether they actually engage or not. This really comes down to a fundamental practice. You need to be brutally honest to yourself first as a leader, because that transpires in terms of your leadership and communication to team members and colleagues and other leaders as well. So it is fundamentally important to make sure that you remain integral to your level of honesty to self. If you get into compromising and conflicting situations, you can still be honest and basically say that this information will be spoken about in a bit more detail at this point in time. And most people will be able to respect that. And if they can't, you can explain why. But the point being made here is honesty is key. Transparency is key. This will make you stand out from the rest. The next fundamental thing to do as a leader is to lead with inclusion, diversity, equality, and equity in mind. And they all have different definitions. Now, with equality, this is, giving people the same stuff or the same opportunities. But with equity, is recognizing that everyone is different and giving them the resources according to those differences as well. When it comes to inclusion, it's making sure that the culture is accommodating for different types of people, and diversity recognizes that different people are different. Okay, so there are different types of people in your environment. And so recognizing this as a leader, you're in a position to know that there are different categories of individuals. So for example, you have people with different values and attitudes and cultures. You have people with different organizational qualities. You have people with different socio-demographics. You have people with different demographics. So this could be marital status, sex, gender, race, ethnicity, religion, hierarchy, etc., etc. And so being aware of this stuff puts you in a position of understanding how to be adaptable, still being integral and authentic, but how you can be adaptable and accommodating in terms of your communication as well. So it's not making crazy assumptions, it's having the right level of unconscious bias, even though we can't completely remove that stuff because it's based on our experiences, but it's knowing how to respond to that stuff and recognizing that stuff and not putting it under the rug. Because once you're able to act this way, then you're in a position of power because people recognize that you get it. But if you're not willing to get it, it's never going to work for you, my friend. So bear this in mind and start acting in accordance to that stuff. You can build this through talking to people of different ethnicities and races and all of those different categories of diversity that I spoke about. Have regular conversation. You can hold workshops, away days that are allowing people to talk about their different challenges, but also holding workshops that address and try to solve some of these issues, or at least recognize what can be done from a structural point of view and an attitudinal and cultural point of view. These are things that can be done. You can also get a coach yourself and try to address some of your inadequacies and challenges. And so all of these things done can help you lead with diversity in mind and inclusion and equality and equity. The next thing to do is to lead with the right level of motivation and inspiration. Now, it's good to avoid something known as dissatisfying hygiene factors. Hygiene factors say something about what motivates an individual to do something and the quality of that motivation. So for example, sometimes organizations try to motivate individuals through bonuses or monetary incentives. Sometimes they try to motivate people through work experience or opportunities or different sort of like vouchers or offers. But there are other opportunities that may motivate people, such as satisfying hygiene factors. Now, these satisfying hygiene factors are things like achievement and recognition, and just really placing value on the individual that has done well. And so recognizing this stuff as a leader, you can realize that there are certain things where carrot and stick is definitely not going to work and will probably work short term. Whereas long term, you need to think about, how do I place emphasis on the individual? There's also Maslow's hierarchy. You can take that into consideration and realize that there are certain things that motivate individuals more. If a certain person's, let's say for example, base needs are not met, okay? Or certain career or health needs are not met, they're obviously not going to be motivated to do specific things. And this is why it's important to understand the individuals within your team or department as best as you can. Of course, I know it's difficult, but you're in a position where you can actually change and maneuver things in order to understand, in order to motivate and transform and reach the vision that you were all called to reach as leaders. The next thing is to lead with systems and management. What do I mean by this? Well, sometimes we forget the basics. Sometimes we forget things like one-to-ones and appraisals and team meetings and all of those different structures that enable us to actually do what we need to do. And so if you have these meetings and policies and things in place, then you are shaping behavior and culture ever so slowly. Now, obviously it requires the right leadership to do that, but as a leader, don't forget to put these things in place and actually attend this stuff and adhere to this stuff. Because usually what happens is, you know, at the beginning of the year or at the beginning of an assignment, the leader's like, okay, we're going to have one-to-ones and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. But as the year goes on, the level of discipline to keep that doesn't happen. So you have to honor your word. Even if that time is reduced, you have to honor that word, because people will respect you for who you are and what you say you're going to do long after the feeling or situation has changed. So make sure you have the right level of systems and management in place. The next thing is to make sure that you lead with innovation. So if you're lucky enough to have business analysts, they can check your processes to see if it's up to date in accordance to whatever standards that you're following or trying to reach. You should definitely invest in some sort of research in order to make sure, again, that you're using the latest methods and technologies in order to be effective. But in the same instance, don't get shiny eye syndrome because that person is using that and therefore you need to be doing that as well because they're your competitor. Think about the goal, think about your team, and think about what you're aiming to deliver. Once you have that in mind, then you understand what can be done in order to make the process more efficient and more effective as you actually implement whatever you're trying to implement. So lead with innovation in mind. It's not always about technology. Sometimes it's a change of behavior, it's a change in attitudes, and it's a change in values as well. So lead with innovation. Now, although I said there were 10 things, I'm going to throw in a bonus, and that is lead with personal development, qualifications, and training in mind. There is no way that you can be an effective leader if you do not personally develop yourself. Now, this can be done more formally through reading, training, courses, etc., etc. But sometimes life experience is the best way to develop as an individual. There is something known as the psychological muscle, and that is moving from a level of subjectivity, i.e. taking things for granted and not being aware of your surroundings and what's happening, to a more objective stance where you're able to look outside in and interpret and understand what is required in order to improve. And so you need to really train your psychological muscle to be a bit more objective and more accommodating when it comes to being a leader. Make sure you have the right level of training. So this may be for a certain level of skills or qualities or methodologies, or just to improve your game as an individual. Make sure you put yourself in situations that enable you to level up as an individual. I also need to say, it's also important to have someone who's by your side. So this could be having an accountability buddy, having somebody who mentors you, having a coach. I think within the corporate environment or executive environment, it's very important to make sure that you have a coach. Even if you're in the entrepreneurship or business environment, again, very important to have a coach. Not just for the technical and the skill focused stuff, but in terms of the quality of your thinking, how you problem solve, how you increase your self-awareness, how you improve your confidence and self-esteem, how you lead. These are all things a coach, a good coach, a trained coach can do very, very well. So always have personal development, training, and qualifications in mind. Now, if you found this video very useful and you want to improve your leadership skills, then click on the link below for a breakthrough session to see how we can make you more impactful and effective as a leader. Now again, with leadership, you have to have a certain level of emotional intelligence. And as I stated before, you need to have a certain level of objectivity. And so in this next video, I'm going to be talking about how you can learn not to care what people think, because the Lord knows it has become very difficult, especially when we're seeing the screen all the time. So if you want to check out that video, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.